Good evening, Villa Park. This is the budget workshop on March 6, 2013, and I will call the order. Trustee Aiello. Trustee Bolfus.
Here.
Trustee Bullwinkle.
Here.
Trustee Case. Trustee Davis. Here. Trustee Taglia.
Here.
President Cullerton. Okay, and I believe I will just turn the meeting over to Manager Keener.
Thank you. Good evening, residents and board and staff. Tonight we're going to have the first budget workshop for fiscal year May 1st, 2013 through April 30th, 2014. Tonight we're going to talk about the corporate funds, the NESRA, recreation and park funds, and if time allows, some of the enterprise funds such as water and sewer funds. Just so folks in the audience and the board understand that we're going to be talking about probably two different fiscal years, because we'll probably make reference to this fiscal year, which terminates April 30th, 2013, and then we'll make reference to next fiscal year, which commences May 1st. So please bear with us when we kind of bounce around. We're kind of used to this. You may not be. So we'll take it slow for you. So tonight's March 6th, so we're going to do the budget workshop. The next workshop will be on March 18th, which will be in conjunction with the regular board meeting. We might do a little bit there. And then March 20th is another workshop that will have some more budget discussions and hopefully wrap it up at that time. Treasurer and Budget Officer and Public Works Director Vitas Jaskelis is going to take us through a slide presentation that he's put together and point out some very important things. If you want to flip the first one there, Vitas, I'd like to mention a couple of things.
Sure.
Vitas, thank you for putting together the slide presentation. One of the most important things that we're asked is, what is the village's fund balance? And lately the fund balance has been right around probably 130 days or so. It's our prediction and projections that we're going to end this fiscal year with 114 days of surplus revenues, if you will. Now, as you can see on the slide, the 90 days budget target, that's a GFOA guideline, and we have achieved that and exceeded that guideline. And if you recall, in fiscal year 2010 and 2011, we had a low of 52 days. And for the folks in the audience and at home and here, in this fiscal year, the cost to run the village is approximately $49,700 per day in the corporate fund. And of course, with the escalations of costs, next fiscal year, I think it goes to right around 52, if I'm not mistaken, very close to that. So we had a total net gain, and we're very happy as staff, and I believe the citizens and the board should be very happy that we've been fiscally responsible, fiscally conservative, and really conservative and right on target for our budget. And as we go through some of the slides that Director Jaskelis has put together, we'll talk about how we've looked at different revenues and controlled expenses, and we did quite well. So, Vitas, I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Manager Keener. As the manager mentioned, we're going to be projecting to end the year at about $5.67 million. We started the year at about $5.29 million, so we're gaining about $390,000. Some of that is because we came in under budget. We're projecting to come in about $13,000 under budget. So the rest of it is through revenue gains. One thing I would note, though, that there was a large one-time payment from the state and utility taxes that's reflected in the revenue. So it's not all operating revenue. But obviously, anytime the state catches up on payments from past years, that money is welcome, and it is part of our fund balance. One of the things we talked about doing last fiscal year was that if we were able to achieve the 90-day fund balance, and remember, it took us 3 years to get to this point, that we would want to start putting some of the excess back into capital programs. So what we're proposing to do both this year and next fiscal year is to start funding some of the capital funds. So we are including in our budget projections an additional $40,000 transfer to the building improvement fund to cover some of the needed things there. In particular, we had some boiler repairs that were done at Iowa Community Center that were not scheduled. So those funds had to come out of the fund, and so we would like to replace the building improvement fund. We have some mold abatement issues at the firehouse, and we have some windows at Iowa Community Center that need to be replaced. I'll get into a little bit more that. We were hoping to get grants for these, but some of our grants are still stuck down in Springfield. We're hoping those grants get released, but then we have other projects that we have ready to fill in as those grants become available, above and beyond the ones I talked about. This slide I'm not going to go into too much because it's in your budget book. The main thing I want to bring to your attention are the formatting changes in this year's budget. One of the things we did since we changed softwares is now we have more flexibility as to what we can put on the report. So if you look at your first two columns, one says prior year actual, current year actual with a date. So that's basically telling you what the year-to-date for the fiscal year through February was last year and what it is this year. So you can kind of see where we are at this point in time compared to where we were last year at this point in time. Now, granted, all the cash flows aren't the same from year to year, but it's still a pretty good indicator of where we are. The same thing with the last three columns to the right. The far right is your proposed budget, and sandwiched in between that and our projections from this year are last year's actuals. So that way you can quickly look at last year's totals and how that compares to what we're proposing next year versus what we're proposing that we're going to end up this year. So it helps comparing where we're at to previous years a little bit easier, I think. There's really, I'll try to use the point, use the pointer here. There's really little change overall between what we're projecting this year for revenue, 18.582 versus 18.54 in revenue. So our revenue projections for next year continue to be conservative. We know there's some other revenue sources in the pipeline, so to speak, but because we don't know when they're coming or how much is coming, they are not in the budget this year. So if they come, that's great, but we're not going to count on them. We're going to budget our revenues conservatively. We do, for FY 13-14, have a balanced operating fund. It's about $4,000 difference between revenue and expenses, but it's about $18.5 million. Expenses is about a 2.2% increase. The consumer price index for this year was 3%, so we're well under the CPI as far as, the cost of living increases and inflation.
I just want to interject.
Sure.
Just so the residents at home and the board and the audience understand, this is a balanced budget we're putting before you. And Vitas will go into more of that, but it's a balanced budget. So.
Thank you. In addition to the operating budget, we are also proposing $190,000 in capital transfers to fund some of the capital funds. Now, with those transfers, we are still projecting about a $5.5 million ending fund balance or 107 days. So the transfers are included in that number. This next slide just gives you a little bit of overview of revenues overall in the village. As you can see to the far right, the corporate fund is almost half of our total revenue, and it in fact supports many of the other funds through transfers. It supports Parks and Rec, it supports the swimming pool, it does not support water or wastewater. They are standalone. I think it does support debt service to a certain extent too, but the corporate fund is really the heart of the village's fiscal vitality and our health. Yes, sir.
To drop this 49% into those other categories, to show where that money's going to instead of just lumping it all in that corporate?
Well, this is just showing corporate compared to the other funds. From a revenue standpoint. Are you
Oh,
talk-
from a okay.
This is revenue. I'm sorry, I should have been
It
clear
was
on
my
that.
mistake, I'm sorry.
In the proposed budget, certain of our revenues are increasing, and we are budgeting modest increases. Sales tax is continuing to rebound, even though it's leveled off from the last few months, so we're cautiously rebudgeting about the same amount for next year. We're expecting to get about $108,000 this year in parimutuel, which is something new for us. We have not been getting that revenue in the past, and that's from the off-track betting. This does not include video gaming. We put a $5,000 placeholder amount for video gaming because frankly, we don't know when that's coming or how much is coming. So we're not going to count on that revenue as part of our operating budget.
Has anybody applied for a license on a video gaming yet?
That's a very good question, Trustee Bolthuis. The answer to that is we believe one is very near, and we believe probably 2 to 3 are right behind.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Going back to sales tax for a second, in the future, we do hope to see an increase as Bone Roofing establishes themselves here. However, we are not expecting that to happen this fiscal year. If it does, that's fine, but again, we're not adding any projected revenues in the budget for that, because we expect that to happen in the future. Places of eating continues to do well. More people apparently are eating out. Our ambulance fees have risen up, and that's mainly because Medicare is now finally paying their bills, which they hadn't for many months. And we are increasing our collection efforts, which we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that is one of our new focuses. Building permits are not slowing down, and this is probably a good time for me to throw in a plug that as of last Friday, we're now accepting credit cards for all building permits and for many other items village-wide. Economic activity seems to be on the rise overall, just from what we're seeing from people coming in for permits, so that's a good sign. Garbage fees I put on here just because of the fact that our garbage contract will be expiring in June. We will be having a successor contract of some point, so I'm not saying it's going to necessarily mean a fee increase and a revenue increase, but it's an unknown object, so I put that up there just to bring it to your attention. Some revenues are still dropping. Property taxes are still lower, and that's mainly because of our lower equalized assessed evaluation. I'm sorry. Don't know when that's going to come back up. We're expecting it to come back up, but right now it's still depressed. Other than that one-time payment from the state, utility taxes are still depressed also. We feel that's partly to the fact that a lot of people are using prepaid phone cards, and those are not subject to utility tax. So those trends continue, and we don't see harsh winters, then that revenue will probably stay down as well. Fines are down overall. Now, we're not necessarily viewing that as a bad thing. It could just be a matter that we're getting better compliance from residents, and they don't need to be fined. But from a revenue standpoint, that is down slightly. We're not proposing any fee increases in this year's budget, other than, I think you already discussed the pool fees last week rather. That's really the only fee increase we're proposing. Commuter parking fees, review inspection fees, licenses are all going to stay the same. Instead, what we want to do is focus on collections and debt recovery. We feel that if we can do a better job of getting the money that's already due to the village first, then we don't need to raise fees, at least at this point. And I know the manager wants to
Sure.
expound on that a little bit.
Yes, thank you. What we've done, and I believe you've probably seen it in my report, but residents at home and board and folks in the audience, what we're doing is we're focusing on fees that are unpaid. For instance, currently, we have approximately $400,000 of uncollected fees and ambulance fees, which is either resident or non-resident. So we're focusing on why that's occurring. Is it a missing signature? Is it just that they can't pay? Is it Medicare? So we're going through with our billing company and determining what is causing the unpaid effect. And rightfully so, we should. Medicare might be behind. One thing that we started offering March 1st was the ability to pay your ambulance fee versus credit card, via credit card. So you could come to the police department and swipe your card, and you could pay your ambulance fee that way, rather than trying to write out a check or being confused on how you can pay it. So we're actively looking at that. And one thing that we found is that when the ambulance arrives at the scene of an incident or event, if they do not get the signature from the person that could be from Medicare, then it delays billing to the fact that it may be 6 months later. So what we're doing is we're paying attention. Did we get the signature at the time the ambulance arrives, or en route, or when you get there? It's very important to do that. It speeds up billing and et cetera. But we're also taking a look at the red speed fines within the police department. Right now we have approximately $193,000 of outstanding uncontested citations that the folks are liable for. And so that's $193,000 that we would like to have. So what we've done is we did an analysis with our billing company, and we determined that what we would do is with folks that have a number of outstanding citations, we did an analysis that if they're at the point of risk of losing their license, we're going to notify them via letter, which we did. We notified 14 individuals that they had 5 or more tickets, and they had to pay their citations within 45 days, or we will approach the state of Illinois to have their license suspended. Well, those 14 people amount to about $19,000. Just 14 people, and it's amazing. So what we're doing, and we're owed that debt. It's uncontested. They're liable. So we're just analyzing that. And now we're going to take a look at neighboring municipalities that have red light systems that we could enter into an intergovernmental agreement to. And maybe they have a citizen someplace that has 3 tickets, and then that same citizen is with us for 2 or 3 tickets. We'll combine them and then go after them to see if we could split the revenue and get some sort of payment to get that 193 down. We're also using for various fines and liens and late water payments and things of that nature, not the ambulance fees though. We're using the local debt recovery through the state of Illinois. So on a weekly basis, we send a file to the state of Illinois with the person's information. If it matches, then they'll withhold that specific amount of money from their tax refund, and they'll notify that individual or business, etc., that it's being withheld, and they have 60 days to contest that. So if it's not resolved within that 60 days, then the money comes to us. And right now, I believe we're very close to $10,000 that we've recouped through various measures that way. So, and it's very nice. So we're not, we're not going by and just turning a blind eye to these. This is something that we're really investigating, putting some time in, and making our billing folks earn their commission. So, thank you, Gabe.
And just to mention again, with the credit cards now, that will allow us to collect the money due to us right away, rather than having to send a bill or try and collection. So I think just the fact that we're accepting credit cards at more types of transactions will also help us with our collection rates overall, which we certainly want to improve.
Manager,
Yes.
while we're talking about collections, where are we at with the state of Illinois in collecting the money that they owe us? How
Actually,
far behind are they still?
that's a very good question, Trustee Bullwinkle. Right now, we've received some payments, and our revenues probably range from maybe 30 days to 3 months behind. So they did pay us on some, and we certainly appreciate. So it's not as bad as it was.
A little better than 6
Yes.
months, which is I think where we, but how much are they still in the rears? Do you know?
I would probably say $1.7 million.
Whoa,
Probably $1.7 million.
That might be a little high.
but that, wow.
Well, a couple months worth of sales tax.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah,
Ooh.
very good question.
But even if we don't have the money, we usually know in advance how much we're getting, so at least we can book it as a receivable. So at
Okay.
least you know, as far as the budget numbers, they reflect all the payments, even though we have not received them yet. We always show as revenue a full 12 months worth of payments from the state in each category.
Like,
Otherwise, the numbers would just be so skewed, it would be way off.
well, there's drive down to Springfield coming up at some point, and probably within the next couple months. That might be something we can address when we're down there. Try to see if we can shake loose those funds, or, you know, do something, make a little bit of noise.
Actually, if I may,
Yeah.
I'd like to add a little something to the comment about the drive down. I challenge staff in each department to develop some of their priorities for, could be capitals, could be equipment purchases. And what we're going to do, we're going to take one sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, and put one single project in there. And we're going to put a picture of it. So if we need a fire truck, it's going to show the fire truck. Then it's going to be the issue with the fire truck. It's going to be the request, and then it's going to be the cost. And if it's a road, we're going to do the same thing. But we're going to put all this in a booklet. And we're going to bind the booklet. And then when we meet with area legislators, we're going to hand them this booklet. And they will know our projects by cost. So if they have an extra $30,000, they can flip through our booklet and say, oh, yeah, I can't help you with the fire truck, but I can help you with that boiler, or I can help you with those windows. So we are going to have that put together within the next 2 weeks
Oh, good.
to be ready for a drive down and things of that nature.
Fabulous. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to expenditures. Similar graph to revenues. This is just, again, corporate fund is about 47.5% of our total expenditures, and it does support many of the other funds. Water and wastewater are enterprise funds, those, so they stand alone. The street improvement fund has a dedicated sales tax, so it does stand alone. But all the other capital projects funds, the swim pool, Parks and Rec, owe at least some of their funding directly from the corporate fund, and in some cases, it's their sole funding source. There are no other source of funds other than the corporate fund. And I think this next one gets back to Trustee Davis's question, the breakdown of expenses in the corporate fund by department. And that is one of the tables listed in your budget book. Again, the overall increase is about 2.2%. And if you'll notice, there is a hitting the wrong button, significant increase in proposed transfers. So the capital transfers that we're adding are included in that number. So that's not just operating transfer, that's also the additional money we want to allocate towards capital transfers. It's all mixed in together there. As we mentioned, we do have a balanced operating budget. We are continuing to focus on funding our core services. This year, we are selectively funding a few priority initiatives, particularly in the areas of economic development, code enforcement and adjudication. We have the Emerald Ash borer tree problem that we have to work on. And we have some fire prevention programs that we want to ramp up a little bit. So it's they're modest increases, but they're things that are on everybody's radar, I think, and they're things that need to be done. So we are adding a little bit of funding for some of those initiatives. And we are going to continue to provide operating transfers for parks, recreation, and pools. This year's total transfer to those three funds is $765,000. We are proposing to maintain our current staffing levels. As you recall, it's been several years now that we had some incentives for employees to retire. I am happy to say that as of June of this year, everything will be fully paid off for any former employee. Finally.
Yeah. Yes.
So that will be a milestone. We are going to continue our cost containment efforts. Among the things we've talked about is consolidation of things commonly purchased by all departments, and Manager Keener could probably give some other examples because I know he's working on several of them, but we are looking at ways to save money. One of the other things I'd like to mention, and I know Manager Keener mentioned this during his State of the Village address, is how the boundaries between departments have come down to a large extent. The interdepartmental cooperation and the sharing of personnel and equipment, and everybody's wearing multiple hats now, and so out of necessity, we have to work together more closely than we ever had in the past. And that has been a focus, I think, since the manager's been here, and it will continue to be a focus going forward.
Makes sense.
And I don't know if you want to add any more comments on that issue or not.
But I'd like to add that I always call it the silo effect, where each department seems to be segregated from the other department. We've tore down a lot of the walls and we're working together. And as I mentioned at the State of the Village address, it's the only way to survive. And we need to do that, and we're wearing multiple hats and doing multiple things. And really, that's the way it should be, to cross-train so that we're covered for vacations and illness and retirements and moving forward to be fiscally responsible, which we truly are. And we're still accomplishing many things, and I think we have a very talented staff, very talented board. And this fiscal year, starting May 1st, should be a very good year for the village in accomplishing a lot of different things. Some things that we probably haven't accomplished previously, such as probably pub ed in the fire department hasn't been funded so much in the recent years. But this year, I'm a firm believer in the education, getting back into the schools, and practice the stop, drop, and roll, things of that nature. So that's important, and we're going to get some folks back into the schools. But we're also looking for a corporation or a business or an individual that would like to sponsor the pub ed through various forms, and even we might even name it after them, so that we get some more donations in there and get in there and help the kids and etc. Since I went in the home a few months ago, I realized how important the safety was, but then like 2 weeks later I actually went to a condo fire, and unfortunately there was a fatality there. And the fatality, I thought, was, it's just my belief, that the fire was on one side of the door and the person opened the door, and then that's kind of what happened. The individual was burned badly. But if we could teach the kids and adults, if the door feels warm, don't open. Or how the smoke accumulates at the top of the roof or ceiling and comes down, and then the good air is at the bottom. I think through education that we can improve a lot of those different things. So we funded it, I guess, is the short answer. So thank you.
And actually,
Can I ask the manager a question? We referred to interdepartmental cooperation and how everybody's working together, and that helps save us money. Has there been any effort in cooperation more with our neighboring communities to help all of us in the western suburbs to communities to save more money?
I think that is a very good question, Trustee Voltheis, and I think it's evident as the last storm that so many folks came and helped us. And it didn't cost us anything when they brought their equipment, the grinders, etc. And when we promised them when they needed something that we would respond, whether they wanted to borrow our striping machine or whatever else that we might have, like a sewer jetter or our command vehicle from police, the urban assault vehicle, and that we could. But we're actively engaged with our neighbors, especially in fire, for training, for equipment purchases to bring down the price through volume or sharing. And we're doing the same thing with the police department, actively looking for vehicles through the cooperatives and buying chemicals through cooperatives, things of that nature. So we're all cooperating to get the prices down. And I think that's another way that we'll have to survive in the future is cooperate. And we've actually reached out to Elmhurst and Lombard to see if we could put road projects together and bid it as one. But sometimes the specs are just a little bit different and it's a little extra work. But maybe we'll get there, that we can bid it out as one big project so we can get the prices down. So,
And certainly, from our department, we're working together with the other municipalities to address the floodplain mapping issue. There's multiple communities involved in that effort.
I just brought up because we're all in the same boat in the communities with this economic situation that we're in. You know, we have to work together, so we all save money.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the capital transfers. Let's talk about that a little bit in more detail. We are proposing $190,000 in capital transfers, primarily to three funds. The Capital Projects Fund, we're proposing to use some of our salt savings, and in spite of this week's storm, we still are going to have a considerable amount of salt savings for next year. One of our salt domes is basically falling apart, end of life, so we'd like to take that opportunity, not budget the salt next year, and instead replace the dome with the same amount of money. We have committed to establishing a reserve for a replacement fire truck, so the budget does include a $100,000 transfer towards that fire truck to be purchased in the future.
Where does that money get transferred into? The vehicle replacement fund?
That would be correct, yes.
Yeah, 'cause I'm just kind of concerned if you put it in there and then, you know, everybody sees that that money's there.
No, because
you know.
I think we can designate it, or is reserve it the correct term?
Earmark it, yeah.
Well, there's,
It's gotta be reserved.
right, the
Okay.
auditors have terminology that if we reserve it, then it can only be used for that purpose.
Good.
And that,
You know, I've seen how Springfield operates, you know, they dip in this fund, move it over here, you know, we don't want to do that.
to add to that, I've been questioned several times by Trustee Davis, so I know that that money's, you know, for the fire truck, and it isn't gonna be spent for anything else unless the board authorizes it. So
Where did the money for the ladder truck go?
that's part of the 100,000.
That's gonna be in reserve?
Yes,
Okay,
so that 80,000 is part of the 100,000, and then
Right.
I challenged staff to come up with another 100, or 20,000 to add to the 80. So now we have 100,000 for a down payment on a fire truck, or et cetera.
We were, you know, this is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but we were, we only budgeted $20,000 in revenue for sales of autos. I hope and expect that that number will be considerably higher. We took that much in just in the last auction, so as long as people continue to do incorrect things in Villa Park and we end up with their automobiles, I think we'll have a funding source for the future.
Manager Keener?
Building
Yeah. In regard, while we're talking about the fire department, earlier you mentioned around $400,000 that we're trying to collect for the ambulance fees.
That's correct.
As we collect those fees, can at least a portion of that go towards the fire truck or some other need that the fire department has? Because I know that they have a number of needs that will need to be addressed, so
That's a very good
we
question.
can earmark some of that.
And I should follow up a little bit on the ambulance fees, because we've made an adjustment with our billing company, and I'll answer your question also. But the billing company, what tends to happen is, after a while, the billing company kind of turns it over to a collections agency, and then after a while, it's written off. But we've recently made the adjustment where it isn't going to be written off until at least 8 months, and we're going to be working hard and diligently to collect part of that 400,000. So it isn't going to be written off after 60 days
Sure,
or
sure.
or
Wow.
70. It's at least 8 months that we're going to be working. And I can tell you, and Chief Rakosnik has mentioned this, that the firefighters are aware of this, and they're truly excited to be able to go after that $400,000 and to make sure they get the signatures. But what Vitas and I, Director Jaskelis and Director Lumpt have talked about, any of the fees that have a potential to be written off, that we went through additional exercises to bring back into the village, that we would like to put those fees into building improvements. We have no funding source for building
Right,
improvements.
and I know there are some needs at the fire department, you know, for
Yes.
some building improvements. It's my understanding one of the buildings is
As
falling
a
apart.
matter of fact, one of the items proposed in this year budget for
So
some
we
of
need-
these transfers is to take care of a mold problem
Yeah.
at one of the
Yeah,
firehouses, and that's
That's
certainly
huge.
a priority issue.
yeah,
One of the other items we want to fund this year with some of these transfers is a replacement of some windows at the Iowa Community Center.
Right.
But again, we still project a 107-day fund balance after these transfers.
that's good.
As with every budget year, there's a few things we have to keep our eyes on and keep a watch on. Healthcare reform costs, we are budgeting a 10.5% increase in healthcare costs.
10.5.
We know there is a new provision in the Healthcare Reform Act that will take effect January 1st, 2013. Nobody, not even the federal government, is sure as to the extent of the impact of that, even though we know there will be an impact. So that's something we're going to have to keep a watchful eye on, and as we get more and more information, we're hoping the 10.5% is enough to cover any eventuality out of the Healthcare Reform Act, but obviously as we get closer, we're going to have to be ready to make adjustments if need be. But at this point, we feel comfortable that the 10.5% should be adequate to cover any contingencies as a result of that.
And I'd like to add on that I think that represents us well, that we're progressively looking at that, we're planning for it, we're not turning a blind eye to that particular aspect. So we do have the funds set aside just in case, so we're ready.
Pension costs, most of the debate at the state level is about the state pensions. However, some of that does include some accounting requirements which could trickle down to the local pensions and could impact our local pensions. So we do need to keep an eye on the pension reform debate even at the local level.
And I'd like to add, and just a little bit on that, that currently our police pensions funded about 63%, and our fire pensions is about 82%, and IMRF, I believe, is close to 100. And that's where we are right now. And of course, we've received and levied for the pensions in this fiscal year coming up May 1st. So we've, we didn't, and to be honest, we didn't grant their entire wish. I believe we met most of it, though, probably 99% of their wish or so. But, so we're on track with the pensions.
State shared revenue, I know we seem to joke about that every year, that the state always is looking for ways to get our money, but it's a reality as the state tries to balance their budget. Every year this comes up, and there's always some type of bill introduced down in Springfield that would take away some of our state shared revenue. So I think the municipalities as a whole have to keep ever watchful of this happening again, because it will come up one way or another in the next session down in Springfield. Fuel costs, that's always something that's volatile, but I feel that we're on the right path. We've started systematically replacing our fuel inefficient vehicles, and I think if we continue to do enough of that, that we will overcome any cost increases as a result of fuel prices increasing. So that's something we hope to utilize again, the sale of auction vehicles to try and replace some of our gas guzzlers. And debt recovery, again, I think the manager spoke on that quite well. We're going to use the Comptroller Act, using things like credit cards to get our collections right away and to increase our overall collection rate. That should be a goal village-wide in every department. Okay.
Actually, can I ask a quick question about
Yes.
the credit card? It's good that we're offering that, it's convenience for sure. Credit cards usually charge a small fee, transaction fee. Have we accounted for that in our pricing, so we're covering all the fees associated with using a credit card?
Well,
In other words, we're not
we have
losing
not
necessarily.
reduced our revenue for that, but one of the things we're going to look at, in addition to purchase cards, which would actually give us a rebate, but
Okay.
to consolidate all our credit cards under one account in an effort to get a better transaction rate. So
Got it.
that's something that's in the works going
Okay.
forward.
Yeah, good, okay.
But right now, it was just a supply and demand. So many of the contractors wanted
Oh,
to pay
sure.
by credit
Oh,
card.
no, it's
So we
definitely
thought
good.
we felt obligated to offer
Oh, yeah,
that
no, it's a good
service.
thing, I think.
One of the, just to dovetail on the credit card item, one of the items that we're looking at right now, village-wide, is the ability to issue purchasing cards to various department heads and et cetera. And by doing that, that will eliminate the 5-part purchase order and save the village money on buying and having that printed, saving time for the employees of passing it around, etc. But one of the neat things with a purchasing card is we will know in a second where that employee purchased it, what they purchased, how much they spent. If we have an individual employee who likes to spend a lot of money and then provide the purchase order, we'll just lower that individual's purchasing card down to $100 to slow them down. Whatever we need to do to be fiscally responsible or to reel somebody in. But one of the neat things for the purchasing card is at the end of the year, there's rebates that come back to the village. So if you take a look at our bill listing, we probably do maybe $1.3 million a month. And so times 12, that's a lot of spending that could go through
Yeah.
purchasing cards. So those rebate dollars would come back to the village at the end of the year and go into some account. Could be a building account, it could be some public fairs account, it could be vehicle replacement, something. So we're looking at all sorts of different things and really doing a holistic approach to the revenues and expenditures of the village.
That'll add up fast, too.
Yes.
They do.
Mr. Manager?
That's a good idea.
Now, you brought up purchase orders, so you opened up the door for this one. For years, we've been talking about a centralized purchasing system. How close are we to that?
Well, that's a very good question, Trustee David, because we just had a meeting today for electronic purchase orders. And Public Works is going to be the guinea pig, the pilot program. And it was very interesting. We had a meeting today, probably lasted an hour and a half. But while I was downstairs diligently working, I get an email that was just a pilot purchase order. And I open up my email and it says you have a pending purchase order waiting for your signature. So that was awesome. So we are moving in that direction, and it won't be long. So would you like to elaborate on that?
Well, we went through the interface with the software. We have a program called Laserfish, which is a document management program. So they've developed some files, and I think it's mostly in PDF, to physically route a PDF copy of the purchase order requisition through electronic signatures. So once all the electronic approvals are obtained, then it'll interface with our accounting system to create the actual purchase order. So basically, it'll be completely paperless and all the approvals will be electronic. So today, Larry Magalanis, our IT director, has been working with them on this. So he's gone through 2 or 3 dry runs himself. So today, we rolled it out to the employees and actually showed them how it would work. And so the next step is actual implementation in the Public Works Department.
Now, do you expect to have any cost savings by doing this?
Well, certainly the paper.
Five-part, I know small companies.
Paper, I mean, the time savings, the cost of errors and omissions, things not lingering because they're not being approved, not having a stack of papers waiting in somebody's inbox. It will automatically route it to somebody else if the person's on vacation. I mean, that's,
Will it
so it
also,
will definitely increase timeliness. So if you look at time as being money, then certainly at some
Sure
point,
is.
there will be some real savings out of this.
will it also be able to match any multiple departments buying the same item? So that we, instead of, each department ordering, say, paper reams, if we buy larger quantities through, say, just through Village Hall and disperse it that way, will it recognize that?
Well, I mean, if you run the right reports, certainly, but that's more a management function. This is more of an accounting function that this program performs. So somebody still has to see that, hey, there's 5 departments purchasing the same thing, let's pool our resources. There's still the human element there. You're never going to eliminate
Okay.
that from those type of issues.
I was hoping that it would automatically pick that up and throw it out, and, buying in bulk would save a little money.
Well, we'll make a note of that for the second version. Maybe it can do that. I mean, certainly there's reports that can identify, duplication. And any good software with a decent report writing capability should be capable of doing that.
Cool.
But you still have to put it in the right person's hand to do something about it once you discover it. And we certainly intend to do that.
Well, thank you. I mean, this is something the board's asked for years, so thank you, guys and ladies.
Okay, we're getting close to the last slide. This is a chart you've seen before. Basically, it goes through the revenues, expenses, and all the funds, and the expected fund balances. So here in the middle, you have the expected fund balances at the end of this fiscal year, next year's budgeted revenues, next year's budgeted expenses, and the expected fund balances at the end of next fiscal year. And we could say for the second year in a row now, we are projecting no negative fund balances in any fund, which is not the case a few years ago. So it's taken some work, but we have been able to do that by, by doing some expenditure cuts, looking at ways to restore lost revenue, particularly I think in the recreation fund. We're going to look at replacing some of our lost programs, utilizing the NESDRA fund and the TIF funds so that we recoup legitimate costs out of those funds when it is appropriate. So utilizing all the resources available to us, I think we were able to achieve an overall balanced budget with no negative fund balances throughout. Some of the funds, such as TIF 3, you could see we're drawing them down, and that's by design. There's Build America bonds. There's $3 million of Build America bonds still sitting in that fund. That money has to be spent. We borrowed that money with the intent of utilizing it for capital projects. So we have to keep presenting projects and moving forward. We cannot just sit on that money. So it may seem like we're spending down some of these funds, but mostly it's for capital purchases, and it's by intent.
We need to stay on top.
Again, there's the 107 days fund balance. Manager Keener mentioned earlier, it's $51,322 per day will be the daily operating expense proposed for next year.
And again, residents at home and Board of Trustees, that 107 days of surplus revenue, that's our projected surplus, April 30th, 2014. I think I want to make that clear. So we're projecting a surplus, a balanced budget, and we're on the right track.
Okay, to wrap up, revenues and the economy as a whole are rebounding, but rebounding very slowly. Every meeting we've been to this year, whether it's auditors or bankers, they're all pretty much saying the same thing. It's a recovery, but it's a very slow recovery, and they expect it to continue to be slow for at least the next several years. But the good news is it is slowly inching upward, and so I think our revenue numbers and our budget reflects that fact. We are projecting a 107-day fund balance up from a low of 52. For the second year in a row, there's no projected negative fund balances. We are addressing about 190,000 in new capital needs, or at least we're proposing to do so. We will continue to watch our spending, and we're going to focus on debt recovery rather than fee increases in the near future. And at that, we'll take any questions.
What I'd like to do at this time, and I know you probably have questions in the back of your minds, and probably the residents do too. I have kind of a list that I've been accumulating as Director Jaskelis and I and Director Lump have went through the budgets and staff, but I know each of us have the things that we always look for in the budget that you're probably thinking, Manager Keener, did you put in there, or did you forget, or what did you do? So I'd like at this time to kind of go through my list, and look, it varies from department to department, but it's kind of my the list that I kind of keep track of the favorite things. So let me start off at the top. That for the residents at home, we are going to buy the hot box for hot patching of the streets, but we're doing that this fiscal year. It's on a 60-day back order, but we're doing that with funds from this year. What we did with the salt, Director Jaskelis touched on that just a little bit. We have over a year's balance of salt on site now. So we took a look at the salt purchase for next year. Do we really need to buy another year's worth of salt to put up next to the year's supply we have now plus? So what we did is we lowered the salt purchasing, and we want to build a new salt dome to replace the one that's falling down, and then use some of the other money for the hot box this year or some other things. So we are going to buy the chemicals in next year's budget, the calcium chloride, I believe. We are going to buy a little bit of salt, but that's what we did for the dome, so we can get that built and improved. There are some other things. Several trustees have asked for the board strategy session. I've placed $8,000 in the budget for the strategy session, which would take place after May 1, which would be the strategy planning session, et cetera, that's been asked for. Some time ago and mentioned in the McGladrey study was a salary study. We talked about doing a salary study, so I placed $25,000 in a fund for a potential salary study next year's fiscal year, and we'll do some comparisons. I matched, or the village matched, if you will, the check written on behalf of the Foreign Fire Insurance Fund to help fund the fire department's electronic sign. So I'll update the citizens at home that the firefighters have been working diligently to create an electronic sign on Ardmore to replace the yellow one on wheels. So what they've done, we're going to use the proceeds from the hydrant adoption. The firefighters have written a $3,000 check from the foreign fire tax, and we placed it in the account, and then the village has matched that $3,000. So right now, the fire department has $10,000 towards their electronic sign to be placed at that area, which we always get compliments about CPR classes and certain things happening. So we are moving towards that. Hopefully this fiscal year coming up, we can do that and be very proud of that.
Manager Keener,
Yes.
while you're talking about that, how much more funding do you need to fill that gap in order to, what is it going to cost to build the sign?
That's an interesting question. One bid came back a little higher than what we thought, about $20,000 without the brick. So we believe we have a donation from an electrical person that will help us with the electrical. We're looking for folks that would help us assemble the bricks and things of that nature so that we can truly use the money to purchase the electronic sign itself and do it that way so we don't have to spend 20 or 15. That we're looking for donation of bricks and things of that nature. However, I did talk to Chief Rakosnik, I think it was today and last week, about maybe having a fundraiser
Exactly.
and having a thermometer and doing it that way, whether
Yep.
it's a spaghetti fundraiser or something like that.
Yep.
Because really, this electronic sign is on Ardmore, which I don't know the traffic counts, but it's a large traffic count, I would assume. And this particular sign would be used for CPR classes and things of that nature. However, it could be a potential revenue source for the village if someone wanted to say, "Happy birthday, Vetus," and we charge them $25 to have that up there. Or a Willowbrook reunion for $25 for a day, and something like that. So we are not only looking at the expenditure and donations, but we're also looking at a revenue source.
Yeah.
So,
Community fundraisers, exactly what I was going to
Yes.
suggest. Community fundraisers. The residents want to help. You know, I hear that time and time again in some way, shape, or form. So I think we could really do some interesting things around a fundraiser, the fire department and other needs that we have around the village. So we should really utilize that as a resource. It's fun too. So. And
Yes.
it involves community engagement too, which is another really good thing. Gets our community involved. So they take ownership as well. So it's great.
what I'd like to briefly discuss next is we're looking, obviously, at fuel-efficient vehicles. And right now, we have a couple of, gas guzzlers, for lack of a better term, in the fire department. So we're looking, after May 1, to purchase a fuel-efficient vehicle and do a 1 for 2, if you will. Buy one vehicle and eliminate two. And it'd be 2 gas guzzlers. And by doing that, we're taking 2 out of the fleet, reducing maintenance costs and raising the fuel efficiency. One of the things on a volunteer basis, I've been working with several volunteers probably for the last 4 or 5 weeks, and we've been talking about the creation of dugouts at the Jefferson Fields. And they don't have dugouts right now, and really it's not only a heat, wind, and rain, but it's also a safety issue for the balls that are hit for the kids. And so, unfortunately, not in this budget, but in the next draft, I've talked to Director Lump, and we're going to add in probably right around $9,000 in the baseball dugouts for an expenditure. Then we're going to turn it right around and add a $9,000 revenue for donations. I'm in discussions with a business that would like to help us with the ball fields at Jefferson, whether it's monetary or it's actually the materials. So we'll be working with the youth baseball and some other volunteers, such as Mike in the audience, and some other folks. And we think we can get those done in a couple of weekends. But so we're going to do that and try to improve the fields. And then we'll move on to try to approve something else next fiscal year or maybe later on this fiscal year. As I mentioned at the last board meeting, we're going to bring back the sewer share of the reimbursement for the residents. So we've placed $40,000 in a line item, and we'll be approaching the board, I believe, on March 11th for the reestablishment of that reimbursement for the homeowner for a maximum of $1,000. So it'll help 40 individuals, 40 addresses for reimbursement. And so that was came from a request from the audience, if you remember. So that's what we've done. I was challenged by President Cullerton to take a look at the emerald ash issue through forestry. So what we've done is we've placed $30,000 for tree replacement within the budget, and we've also placed $30,000 for emerald ash treatment, so the injection of the trees to slow down the death of them, so that we can kind of catch up and not have to actually remove 500 trees at once. We can remove maybe 150 and have these damaged trees last maybe 3 to 5 years longer, etc.
Manager Keener?
Yes.
Along with that, during a previous board meeting, I mentioned CSX Railroad. They do provide grant funds for that purpose to replace trees that have been damaged, whatnot, by the emerald ash borer. So wondering if that might be just another avenue to look at.
Absolutely.
See if there's any funds left for
Absolutely.
that as well.
I appreciate that. And really, we're not only taking a look at the emerald ash borer infestation within the community, but we're also doing it on the golf course. And we have removed a number of infested trees at the golf course, which are very close to Van Buren, so we'll be looking at replacing those trees next fiscal year. And we're also in discussions with Elmhurst Park District to see if not only we can help replace some, but they can help replace some as well. So again, it's going back to the intergovernmental cooperation and residents. If you remember, the Village of Villa Park co-owns the golf course with Elmhurst Park District, so it's kind of a sharing agreement that we do. One thing that's key that we're going to do that we had undone years ago is the fact that it's our staff's desire to rejoin DUMEG effective May 1st. And that cost is $19,240. And what we'll do is we'll take that from the DUI fund, and that is a correct expenditure of those funds so that we can get back in DUMEG, another intergovernmental cooperation, and share information and get the folks back in our community and hit the streets and do the things that we really need to do on a regional basis and within Villa Park and
For the
cooperating.
for the residents at
Right.
home, what's DUMEG?
Right.
That's a very good question, and Chief Pavlicek, can you enlighten us?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Your voice
You
would
thought
probably
you were gonna
carry
get
though.
away with that.
No. DUMEG is the abbreviation for the DuPage Metropolitan Enforcement Group. MEG, or Metropolitan Enforcement Group, is a state-run jurisdictional task force in terms of narcotics enforcement. And we previously were members, and just to make a minor correction, not that I like to correct my boss, that's out of the drug asset forfeiture is the proper use of
I knew that
DUMEG's
it was.
membership. But being involved in a task force, the men and women of your police department do a fantastic job now on a lot of narcotics investigations. But it's my goal to broaden our horizons a little bit, because we could use the help, and the problems we have here in Villa Park are not isolated just to Villa Park. So we need to be involved in our partnerships, and certainly task forces are the way to go. That's why we're the members of the task forces we have, is to get the economies of scale for our membership. So,
So basically this will be our tactical unit.
well, we'll still have a tactical
Used
unit,
as the
but
tactical
certainly being members of the task force puts the resources of the task force to your availability. So,
And it'll help us in a number of ways.
I
you
sure
know.
will.
take help every place we can get it.
That's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
And really, I'd like to add just one more thing. And I believe residents at home and the board, I think everyone is aware that we're a member of DUCOM, which happens to be the dispatching unit, arm, if you will, for the fire and police departments around our community. And that's another agency that we cooperate to dispatch for our police and fire events. This year, we reported some correct numbers, if you will, folks, and we realized about a $40,000 savings on the police department side. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think a $2,000 savings on the fire side. So about $42,000 savings for DUMEG this fiscal year, effective May 1.
DuCount.
Or DUCOM, I'm sorry. Well, maybe we'll get a reduction in DUMEG too if we get some folks corralled there. So we're looking at everything, and I want the citizens at home to know that we've really looked at a lot of different things. One of the items that we put in last year was funds in the demolition fund. We have approximately, I believe, $30,000 in the demolition fund again for May 1. And we really didn't use too many of those dollars this fiscal year, but we will for the demolition of 419 South Monterey. So some of those funds are going to be used. Now I just want to switch to one thing. Now, Director Giskelis mentioned it, that we had Head Start leave from Park and Recreations. Well, they left, and then when they left, they took the revenue with them. So, and I'll be honest with everybody, I have challenged Director Gola to make up the difference. And we have increased his revenue by about $27,000. So we are going to be putting our heads together, and maybe we're going to have dodgeball tournaments. Maybe we're going to have some other training sessions, and maybe we're going to have another princess ball. But we're going to be focused on making up that revenue lost, so that we can move forward and have a balanced budget and be fiscally responsible. So, and that is truly a challenge to that particular department. So, I think that's all I want to mention from our wish list. And so, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, or if you have another wish you want to put in. But it is a balanced budget. Please keep in mind.
Can I make some closing remarks?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to thank all the department heads for all their efforts in coming up with a balanced budget. I literally have a file cabinet full of budget drafts. I think we went through about 20 different drafts to get to this point. Our first draft was $1 million negative, and so getting to a balanced budget was not easy. So I just want to thank everybody involved in the process. And there was a lot behind the scenes going to get to this point.
And if you like, I know the agenda says we'll talk about the corporate or NESDA or recreation, parks and pools. Would you like to go through the budget page by page? What is your desire at this time?
I don't need to go through it page by page. You know, I would suggest if anybody has any questions on any certain items, maybe we just address those, whatever everybody else thinks. Is that what
We're gonna have a budget meeting
on
on the
the
18th,
20th, too?
the 18th?
Yes, on the 18th.
And on the 20th?
Okay,
Yes.
If,
if needed.
all right.
I'll do this as homework.
Can I ask a question then?
Absolutely.
On the transfers, I know in the past that we've always had a challenge with the transfer amount that we were transferring to the swimming pools. And I see we've really, I guess the pools are pretty much carrying their own, pulling their own weight to a certain extent. I notice the transfers aren't nearly as high as they've been, because some years they were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, so.
What we've been doing with the transfers the last few years, we've been looking at Parks, Rec, and the pools in unison. So if one fund is lagging, the other one's doing well, we've been shifting the money to where it needs to go to keep all three of them afloat. So there's some fluctuations from year to year, but our goal has been to try and keep all three of them afloat without having to inject additional dollars out of the corporate fund. And in this fiscal year, we were able to do that just by shifting around some of the transfers to keep all three of those
okay.
funds positive.
Okay, so, all right, thanks.
And just so everyone realizes it at home and the board, we are going to put tonight's slide presentation on the website, so the residents at home can take a peek at it, take a look at the numbers, because they're probably a little small on this screen. And then as we proceed, we'll put that information on the website also, and keep everyone up to speed. And if anyone at home would like to see the budget, we do have them here, and can get one to you somehow. You just got to contact us here at Village Hall.
The proposed budget.
The
right?
proposed budget, yeah, because it is a draft at this point.
Right.
So at this time, if there's no questions, I believe we can adjourn. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Davis.
Okay, that was trustee Davis. Okay, is there all voice ayes?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.